welcome back to part 2 of Astrology Investigates Sean Coombs. This video segment is about rectifying a time of birth, what I think is his rectified time of birth, and I'm doing a quick, fast, and dirty rectification. So I could very much be wrong, but I'll present to you what I've sussed out so far and why I've come to these conclusions and how this plays out if this is an accurate time of birth. Okay, so let's take a look at what we've got. Now, in full disclosure, when I first looked at his chart and realized we didn't have a birth time, I was wondering, like, what could his birth ascendant possibly be? Because we know that the sun and the moon are the two legs of a three-legged table, right? So with the sun in Scorpio and the moon in Virgo, right there we have 2 of 3 legs. And I'm like, what would his ascendant have to be? Because, and here's where we're going with this, I thought he might be Aries rising, or maybe Pisces rising. And I'll tell you why I thought those two things in a second. Or maybe Mars close to the ascendant, maybe. But I wasn't feeling it, so I was playing around with charts. So here are some things, right? With the sun and the moon in Scorpio and Virgo, these are feminine signs. So what you get is a more soft presentation, okay? There's nothing soft about Sean. He's very polished, and he's very smooth, but there's a Martian quality about him, a very Mars nature about him. Like he's almost sinister, right? He looks like the devil. There's something very Mars about him. There's nothing soft about the way he, even in silence, he sort of like seethes, right? Very Mars. And Scorpio, of course, seethes and is very intense and kind of radiates power, blah, blah, blah. Like you can read any book of basic astrology and it'll give you all those nice keywords. But this is different. This feels very Mars. And also knowing his history, and certainly with the gangster rap that he rose to fame on, you know, it was there. And the other thing too is that now that we've looked at his natal chart without the time of birth, we know that Mars dominates the entire chart. His entire chart is colored by that Mars at 29 degrees, 50-some minutes, 54 minutes, Capricorn. So that's a strong Mars energy, no matter what his rising sign is. If we had put Mars and Capricorn anywhere near that ascendant, one, we would have injuries or like cuts, scars, burns, right? We would see evidence of real physical injury, basically, and also a much more ruddy complexion, and certainly not nearly as smooth a complexion. So Mars on the ascendant was out. That was not a consideration. Capricorn rising, no. Capricorn rising either gives you people with incredibly good bone structure that look like they're starving to death, right? What is it? The Hamlet, Shakespeare's Hamlet, the lean Dane, or it gives you very not so aesthetically pleasing people. So Capricorn rising was out, and it also makes you look much older than your years, which is good when you're young, not so good when you're older. He's definitely youthful looking for sure. So that wasn't an option. So I said, well, maybe it's Aries rising, right? And I thought Aries rising, if you look at the eyebrows here, come here, right? Mars on the ascendant, but certainly Aries rising gives you these very arched, severe kind of eyebrows, pointy, sharp, like horns, like little horns sticking off their head. So I thought maybe that. And I thought, well, but if it were that, if it was Aries rising, Mars and Capricorn would rule the chart, and maybe. So I played with that possibility, Aries rising. And then I thought maybe he's Pisces rising, because, you know, these sad bloopers, right? But Pisces rising is an interesting placement because it tends to give you extremes, right? So I get people who are extremely small in their extremities, hands, feet, you know, or extremely large, right? It's almost like a cartoonish comic book sort of thing, like a circus clown exaggeration of things. Or you get the big thyroid eyes, the big bug eyes, right? Like Gene Wilder. But also too, usually, you know, you get like the sad expression. So I'm like, well, maybe it's Pisces rising. And if that were the case, Jupiter and Neptune would have been his chart ruler. So I'm thinking Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. He could be Jupiter ruling the chart, right, with Pisces rising, because that's going to put Jupiter and Venus together in Libra, which is going to give us definitely this beautiful, clear complexion and this very pretty appearance. And listen, say what you will about the man and who he is as a person. On the outside, he's very pretty. So I'm like, well, that's a possibility too. But what was interesting is this, right? So he has literally the most perfect Cupid's bow lips I have seen in a long time. And that I distinctly remember was connected to or correlates with one of the signs. So I looked it up, and the Cupid's bow lips like his, and this right there, that is associated with Mercury and Gemini. Okay, so I'm like, okay, well, maybe he's Gemini rising, right? And if he's Gemini rising, that's going to make Mercury his chart ruler, but Mercury's not in the strongest position, right? So I'm doing all this just based off the appearance. That's not really the way you want to go, but it's a starting point, right? When you have nothing else to work with. So it's going around the chart, and I'm like, well, what if he were Libra rising? Because then Venus would rule the chart, right? And Venus is conjunct Jupiter in Libra, conjunct those beautiful fixed stars we saw in the other thing, which would absolutely reinforce what we see in the here and now, which is, this wonderfully prosperous, successful life, this beautiful skin, right? Clear complexion, this very pretty appearance, right? I'm like, that could do it. And also, too, Libra is obsessed with skin. I don't know if you guys know this or not. Libra is obsessed with skin. So they really have a thing for skin, complexion, skin feels, skin tones. They're very sensitive to it. It's kind of an interesting thing, almost a fetish. And they're also very fixated on smells, right? Things that smell good, themselves, other people. Now, I don't know what his thing with smells are or odors. I mean, we don't know. We don't live with them. But the other things seem to check. So I said, let me try Libra rising. I tried the other ascendants. And when I did the other ascendants, I tried setting up what's called a solar return, which is your personal horoscope for the year ahead, to see if any of them tracked, right? Do any of these solar returns pan out for this year that just passed, when Cassie started a lawsuit and all the stuff came tumbling out of the closet? Or the year his father died, or the year he moved. Like, is there anything here that tracks with the events of his personal year? And none of them were working. So I finally decided on Libra. Well, let's give Libra a try, because Venus rising and Venus in Libra conjunct Jupiter would absolutely reflect his life, And I moved around a little bit, and what I came up with, based on life events, because that's what you're using with your rectifications, you always use big, life-changing life events, physical moves, deaths, births, marriages. And what I came up with was 29 Libra rising, with Venus as the chart ruler, and Jupiter, conjunct Jupiter, in the 12th house. Now, let's assume, and remember, I could be wrong, so let's assume that this is, in fact, what we're working with, and this is his chart ruler, because the solar return actually pans out for this. What does this tell us now about our little Mr. Sean? In full disclosure, when I first started poking around for his chart, right, before I even really looked at it, I realized we didn't have a time of birth, and I'm like, I wonder what his time of birth is. Like, what would his rising sign be? So before I even looked at the natal chart, really looked at it, I just kind of, glanced at it, and I looked at him, and I'm like, So Mars, he's definitely a Mars character. This guy is so Martian, right? There's such a strong Mars energy coming off of him. I'm like, maybe he's Aries rising or Scorpio rising, because that's going to give him Mars rising, right? Or Mars ruling the chart, rather. And Mars in his chart, of course, we now know, is in the final degrees of Capricorn, and just dominates the chart. So that makes sense. We're picking up all this Martian energy off of him, even when he's being quiet, right? He's just seething. That's so Mars. And but I set the charts up, and I'm like, no, that's not working. That's not really working, right? And the other reason I was saying I think he may be Mars rising is if you look at his eyebrows, they're very distinct, right? They're very sharp, angled, and distinct. It's one of the first things you notice about him. And that's classic Mars Aries emphasis on the ascendant, right? But Aries rising wasn't working because that also put Saturn and Taurus in the first house. And Scorpio rising, it wasn't, I mean, maybe I was holding out on that, right? And then I'm like, well, maybe he's Pisces rising. I mean, he does have these big sad bloopers, you know. And if he's Pisces rising, that means Jupiter and Neptune are going to be his rulers. Jupiter is conjunct Venus in Libra, and that would give us this very pretty face. And I'm like, but he's not soft. Like, even with Mars dominating his chart, it's Pisces rising would soften a lot of that. He's definitely not soft. And also Pisces rising doesn't lend itself to a really muscular physique as well. Pisces rising is not very athletic. They're not gangster lean, excuse the pun. So then I was like, well, okay, so all right, I'm still back to Aries, Scorpio, Pisces, right? Definitely not Capricorn. And the reason I don't believe that he's Capricorn rising is that with Mars anywhere in that first house, we're going to have somebody, especially in those last degrees, one who probably might not have even made it to their 30th birthday, but also we would expect to see a lot more cuts, wounds, burns, like physical scars and to the physical body, especially around the head, which we're not really seeing here. And he doesn't come off as very Saturnine in that way, right? So he doesn't come off as very Capricorn. So I did I looked at his biography and looked at his timeline. And when you do rectifications, you always want to base it on the events in a person's life. Because the one thing you cannot goose, stretch, or otherwise improvise your way through are the actual years of life and the events that happen in them. So we know that for Sean, his father was murdered. One of the big precipitating events in his life was that his father was murdered when he was 5. There's when he was 5 years old. And then later, when he was 12, about 9 years later, he was 12 years old, his single mother, or his widowed mother, and he moved to Mount Vernon, New York, which is a big, very nice suburb in New York State. These are big life events. So the angles and the chart, predictive charts, like solar returns, have to reflect these events because otherwise it makes no sense. And the chart doesn't work. So I know we're all looking at this Pisces eclipse that just happened because it's like, oh my God, what, where? And I looked for it too, and I could not find any connections to the Pisces eclipse. Did find some connection to the eclipses before. We're going to talk about that in a second. So the other thing that I noticed before I started while I was playing around with the times, right, is that perfect Cupid's bow lip, right? I haven't seen a perfect Cupid lip like that on a person in a long time. And I remember that there's a correlation between a Cupid's bow mouth and a certain sign or planet rising, because it's apparently it's very Mercury Gemini when it does show up. So I'm like, that's interesting. Maybe it's Mercury or Gemini rising? Well, okay, so I played around with that as a possibility too, and that was not it. What I did come up with after rectifying some charts based on major life events and looking at them was Libra rising. So the solar return, the predictive charts that I have seem to be timing like on point with a 29-degree Libra rising. I could be wrong. This was a quick, dirty, and fast rectification. I could be completely wrong. But I'm going to go with it because the timing on the horoscopes when we do predictive years ahead for him, his personal years, it seems to be playing out. The angles hit the timeline for major events in his life, and the chart ruler and all that it describes looks like what we see. So for this video and for this discussion, I'm going to go with 29 Libra rising. If you come up with something different, show your work because I'd love to hear what you got and how you got there. All right, we can compare notes. So, all right, so not Gemini, not Aries, not Scorpio, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, so the first thing is with this Mars energy, right? We know that Mars in the T-square chart dominates the chart. That's going to come through no matter what, okay? So that takes care of that, and that's why we're seeing those strong eyebrows, right? These sharp, pointy eyebrows, Mars eyebrows. The other thing, too, is with late Libra rising, it's going to put that Mercury and the Sun in Scorpio right there in the first house, very close to the ascendant. Now, Mercury is going to give us the beautiful Cupid's bow lips, right? Scorpio and the Sun in the first house is going to make him noticeable. The thing you got to know about people with the Sun in the first house is that they know how to dominate a room with their presence. They love being the center of attention. There's literally no one who's born with Sun in the first house that does not love being the center of attention or the life of the party. They dominate a room by their sheer presence, because that's what works on him. He's always going to draw attention to himself no matter where he goes, and he would know that about himself. Now, the important thing here is the chart ruler. Always go back to your chart ruler. That's why we want the angles. So with with Libra as the ascendant, now Venus and Saturn become the chart rulers. Saturn is secondary. Okay, so let's start here. With Venus as the chart ruler in Libra, it's going to make him very pretty. And indeed, he is. That is one pretty boy. He is ugly on the inside, but on the outside, he's pretty. And with Venus and Jupiter conjunct in Libra, it's going to give him great skin. So he probably would have had a nearly acne-free teen years, I'm guessing. Smooth glass complexion. He's got beautiful, beautiful skin, right? I mean, look at him, Jesus. And also, too, with Venus and Jupiter, it's going to make somebody a bit of a peacock, a bit of a dandy. So the things that, we don't know him personally, maybe you do, and you can tell us about it. But one of the things we would expect with somebody with this particular configuration, with the chart ruler Venus conjuncting Jupiter in Libra, is somebody that loves to play dress up, loves to smell good. So smelling good is a really important thing for him as well. Being fashion ready, literally leaving the house or even when he's walking around the house is very, very important to him. And remember, he's got that moon in Virgo. So he's going to be very fastidious is the word that I'm looking for. Very, very anal retentive about how he looks, how he appears, how the condition of his clothes, the coordination of his fashion, how he smells. His grooming would be literally off the shelf, almost obsessive compulsive. Okay, because that's what you're going to get with this particular combination. Now, remember, we said Saturn is also the ruler because Saturn is the ancient ruler, or not the ancient, the co-ruler of Venus. Saturn is in Taurus in the 7th house in its retrograde. Now, this also tells a little bit about us and definitely fits the profile of who we're dealing with. With Saturn in the 7th house, it's difficult to get married. For whatever reason, marriage is delayed or denied in this lifetime. Or when one does get married, it becomes a huge burden and obligation. There are lots and lots and lots of karma, karmic payments that have to be made in this lifetime through the institution of marriage, whether one chooses to be married and pay your debts that way, or chooses to, or not chooses, but find yourself unable to get married and you pay your debts that way. So there's that. Now, one of the things I would look for is with him, something should have happened, 5 years old. So when he was 5 years old, we should have had a major event in his life that was very karmic, and that is the year or the age when his father died. Okay. With Saturn in that 7th house and retrograde, it makes it difficult for him to get married. And we talked in the other video about how he has exceptionally high standards, hypercritical, high standards, unrealistic perfectionism when it comes to his partners, which is going to make it very difficult for him to get married anyway, right? Because, I mean, who on earth can live up to those kinds of things? And here we see that, we see that inability to be more relaxed and tolerant of our partners showing up in the 7th house. So the combination of these things is going to make it literally almost impossible for this man to get married or stay married. You wouldn't want to be married to him for sure. But again, remember, moon, even though the moon parallels Saturn, and makes him very cold, emotionally cold. He is an emotional dead fish. It does, however, make him extremely loyal. So, in that regard, I mean, if you're okay being married to an emotional cold fish who will never leave you, always be your rock when you need him, then, he's your man. Okay, so this fits. This tracks so far, right? Now, the thing also, too, we're looking at it, we're like, so with Mercury in that 1st house and the Sun in the 1st house, this is somebody who, again, Mercury in the 1st house is going to be somebody who's got the gift of gab. They know how to talk to people, which is interesting because with these particular placements as his rulers, what we have is somebody who's basically, believe it or not, an introvert. He's very private. He's very shy in many ways. He's happier being left alone, in the fantasy island that is his head. He's much happier living in his head by himself. It's just the way he's wired. He could be alone for a long time. It just, I don't think it would ever really actually bother him, right? Because the inner workings of his mind keep him occupied plenty, and he's happy there. Now, this goes completely against what we're seeing here, right? Which is that Sun, Mercury in the first house, life of the party, loves to be the center of attention. The what is it? The parade leader, leading everybody down the street. So he's very, very good at what he does, especially when it comes to orchestrating. Remember that word, orchestrating things that involve other people, because Scorpio loves to be mischief maker and goad and tease and orchestrate other people to be their own undoing. They're quite a handful in that regard. And also too, because that's Sun Mercury opposing Saturn, like remember, power, domination, and control. And in this case, it's coming out of his angles, his first and his seventh house, both self and other people. So power, domination, and control for his amusement, orchestrating that and orchestrating other people to play right into their own weaknesses for his entertainment is absolutely what you would see with this particular combination in these houses. And certainly what we're finding out about him. And there's more to come. There is more to come. So like I said, I don't know how low this man is capable of going in this lifetime, or has gone, rather. I don't know how low this man has gone in this lifetime, but he is capable of going to some seriously low lows. So, there's that. So he does love to be in center of attention. He loves to make mischief, and he loves to set people up and orchestrate their downfall, as it were. And playing their own weaknesses, in spite of the fact he really, at heart, is an introvert. He's shy. He's an introvert. He likes to be alone. He needs his downtime, and more specifically, his alone time. Now, with that said, he is still a musician, right? So we have to see something in here that indicates music or musicians or arts. So remember we talked about that North Node and how he's not really doing his North Node, because he's definitely doing that South Node and Virgo business. Well, when we put these in houses now, that North Node that he needs to be doing is right here in his fifth house of creativity. That South Node is here in the 11th house of groups, strangers, acquaintances, friends. So here's an interesting thought for you guys to entertain. So with a North Node in Pisces, and Pisces definitely rules music and the arts, with the North Node in Pisces in the fifth house, one of the things that he's here to do is to express himself through the arts or through music, which he absolutely has. Absolutely has. He's been very, very dedicated to things that are of the more artistic, aesthetic presentation. Even fashion in and of itself is a form of art, right? Because it's color and design. So he's absolutely in that way doing his North Node. All the other parts of that North Node in Pisces is clearly not doing, but he's definitely doing his North Node in that way, and that's where he is at his best and where he flourishes. And true to form, that's exactly where he has flourished. Because even in business, one of the things that he went to was a whole fashion line, right? Did really, really well with it. Unlike those weird cloud sneakers, I think it was Kanye designed. I don't even know. Anyway. But here's the thing, check this out. The South Node, right, over here. The South Node is where we've been. It's where we don't want to go back to. We want to go back to it because it's easy. It's familiar ground. We've been there, done that. We know how that works. So we all kind of tend, it's like a bad habit. We all tend to backslide in our South Node because it's easy. And it's okay to go back and forth between these things, because if you've got a talent you developed or whatever, and it's familiar ground and it's easy, absolutely you should use it. But you can't live there. Right? So you can always go home, but you shouldn't go home and live there. Like you should be moving on and making your new home. With the South Node in the 11th house of groups and associations, right? This also indicates that in a previous lifetime, he was very heavily involved in politics and social groups, things that had to do with literally large groups of strangers and influencing public policy. How's that for fascinating? Because remember, it's in Virgo too. And also things that involve the lives of other people, right? And, friends and social, because politicians have to be social people. That's what you do to get support. You get people to support you, and you got to do that by being social and being socially graceful. So with that South Node in Virgo in the 11th house, if you live in your south node, and this is good for you guys to remember, if you go to your south node and you live there and you're not actively working on your north node evolutionary challenges, bad things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. And I don't mean bad things that you're going to come down with cancer and die, because your tongue falls out of your mouth or anything like that. What I'm saying is, not only will your life stop moving forward because you are going backward in your participation in life, but also too, things are not going to work very well for you. Things are not going to work out. Things are just not going to work in your favor. Everything's going to be harder. It seems like everything's going to dissolve and slip out of grasp constantly. Well, what has been Sean Coombs undoing? His social circle, the 11th house social circle. Okay. So his south node in Virgo, right, in that 11th house, in a previous lifetime, he was a politician. It was all about, meet and greet the public, social stuff, right? Being out there with, wide, varied groups of people, being the consummate host. All the sort of things you would expect with a very successful person who's involved in public policy and social things. And anybody who's familiar with those types of environments and jobs would know that this is exactly what we're talking about. So it's not catering to a select few. It's about being, the man to the people, all the time in the best presentation. And what has proven to be his undoing right now? His social life, all those random friends and acquaintances that are part of large groups, part of that 11th house social circle he's involved in. That is what got him undone. That is his south node, because he was living there. He went to his south node and he never pulled himself out at the expense of that north node in Pisces. Because remember, Pisces is music. North node is where we're trying to go. It's your lucky placements, right? Fifth house is creative expression. And when he did that, when he first came on the scene as a musician, that's where he benefited, right? The heavens opened up and showered him with all this beautiful Venus-Jupiter blessings, okay? But as soon as he got to a certain level, I don't know, because I don't live with him. He must have slacked off and really fallen back into just living out that south node in Virgo in the 11th house. Party, 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 social life, social life, social life. I am the man of the hour. I am the parade leader and the ringleader. Follow me to the party. And that is what undid him. Interesting, no? Okay, so with that said, now let's take a look at that Mars. Now remember, Mars is part of this big hunkin' T-square that's really uncomfortable in this chart. So Mars is, I said it was a T-square and now I can't find it. Oh, Lord, today. Right. All right, so we know Mars dominates his chart, colors everything, like totally overrides everything in his chart. It is Mars, Mars, Mars. Mars is at a critical degree. It's at the last degree, last minutes of Capricorn, which presents some sense of urgency or literally a push to move forward, get past it. Let's get this thing done yesterday. Now, also with that, before I get too far into this, look at this. With 29 Libra rising, again, we've got that 29 degree repeated, and it's in square to Mars. So the first thing with 29 degrees rising, typically people with 29 degrees rising almost didn't make it through. All right. So there may be a story that they were or were not told about where they almost didn't make it out of the birth canal. 29 degrees rising can also represent last chance lifetimes. So this may be, unfortunately for him, given how everything's going, his last chance lifetime. And boy, if that's the case, he really screwed this up. But he's not dead yet. He still has time to redeem himself. So we'll see how this story ends when we get there. In the meantime, Mars, which dominates his chart because it is part of this big old honking T-square, right? This Mars squares the ascendant, which further emphasizes Mars, right? As if Mars wasn't loud enough in this chart. And Mars also, too, is an exact square to a 29 degree ascendant. Mars is at those last degrees, last chance lifetime sort of stuff. So there's something here that we don't, well, I'm sorry, there's something here that I don't know about, so I don't have any ability to give a better explanation for it. Now, we know literally within months after his birth, Mars would have changed signs and gone to 0 Aquarius, and then it would have hit that nadir at 4. So those first 5 years, those first 5 years of life were extremely critical. There were a lot of big changes and a lot of tectonic plate shifting under the ground as life was about to make major pivots and turns. So I don't know what happened in his early years, but something very, very serious. He's had some very serious close calls in his early years, up to the age of 5 years old, up to and including possibly not even having made it out of the birth canal alive. So I'm not sure what that's about. It would be interesting to know. We may never know. I mean, people close to him might know, but I don't know that anybody's going to tell the general public. The other thing, too, is with Mars in exact square to the ascendant, and both of them at the 29th degree, one of the things that I would also look for is the possibility of a major cut or scar. Not necessarily visible because this is below the horizon, right? Mars is cuts and scars, and with the ascendant, that's the physical body. So some cut or scar or surgery that may have needed to occur in those first 5 years of life, and possibly even, I hate to say it, maybe even possibly involving his genitals. Okay, so I don't know, maybe it's a circumcision gone bad or something. We'll never know. Somebody knows, but it's not us today. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so now this is where we start getting timing. So I did this. This is the solar return, okay, for him based in New York. I think he was in Miami for his birthday, but it's not that much difference in the angles from Miami to New York for a solar return. So we just left it as his birthplace. So with a solar return in this chart, there are a number of things come up that are very, very interesting. Now, this solar return is for 2023, his birthday in 2023 to his birthday in 2024. We know that within days, because his birthday is November 4th, within days of his birthday, this woman Cassie filed her lawsuit, which became huge public knowledge, and also apparently broke open the dam for everything that's come tumbling out behind it. So I was looking for like something connecting the November 16th date to the solar return, not really finding it so much. But again, you have to do multiple charts. So the solar return is just a big snapshot, and you need lunar returns, progressions, all sorts of stuff to get really pinpoint down to the day. So forgive me if mine's more general. What we did find with his solar return for that year, remember, this solar return, personal horoscope for him, starts November 4th of 2023, right before the Cassie lawsuit broke open. And for this year, from 2023 to 2024, so this is going to go on until November 4th of 2024. He's under this influence. Okay, so the first thing we see is, look at this. His natal Neptune, which is right here, is conjunct the solar return ascendant with this rectified chart. That's pretty big, right? And also, because remember, his solar return is just starting. We're into, oh no, it's just finishing. So we're into October, November. In a couple of months, he's got this snapshot is going to end. So one of the things that we know, November 2023, November 2024. Sorry, old people time. One of the things that we know is that with Neptune on or near the ascendant, there's a whole lot of murky stuff happening. It's very, very hard to see what direction things are coming from. Things are being weird. There's also losses, there's draining, dissipation, dissolution, right? There's lots of losses that typically come up when you have Neptune on an angle like this. And also it's a really highly sensitized time, because you talk about losing touch with reality. You're not completely sure what's happening, like, because you're not as strongly anchored to reality as you normally are, okay? So that would have been his year from birthday 2023 to birthday 2024, right? And it certainly seems to describe it, especially if he is as strung out on drugs as everybody is saying he's been. But again, I don't know. We'll find out shortly. What's also interesting is that this Neptune that shows up here in his natal chart, it exactly conjuncts his second house. As a matter of fact, with a rectified chart, the second house cusp is 27 Scorpio, and it is right here on that 26 degree 59 minute ascendant on his personal horoscope for 2003-2024. So my suspicion is if none of that happened yet, one of the things that I would probably have looked at is the possibility of losing money, like major losses, hemorrhaging money, major loss of money, because the second house is involved. Personal resources being dissolved, right? So I would have thought bankruptcy, and maybe still, but certainly the feds have seized his assets and his resources, so he's got no money now. I don't think that he's going to be able to recoup his losses after this. Neptune is long term, and it's an outer planet, so it's almost permanent. So permanent losses, permanent major losses of the financial kind or resource kind is what I would have expected to see at some point during this personal horoscope year. And it looks like we're seeing it. Remember, this expires in November of 2024. So it's all coming to a climax. The predictions for this year, or this personal year, is coming to a climax by the birthday of this year. So we'll see what happens and what his, well, if he's around, God bless, what his charts look like for 2025 after the birthday. So there's that. Okay, so let me get rid of that. Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting is when you look at this solar return for birthday 2023 to birthday 2024, again, Neptune comes up. Look at this. Neptune opposes his chart ruler Venus in the charts. So, and that's not good, right? Again, long-term losses, disillusion, confusion, being less tied to reality than you normally are. And also with Venus opposing Neptune, there's also the suggestion of betrayal or sabotage by other people. Now, we know that Neptune, again, rules his second house of finances, so money is an issue here. Certainly money is involved. Venus also rules his 8th house. So not only does Venus rule his 12th house of secrets and things going on behind the scenes, his first house of personal self, it also rules that 8th house of shared debt. So right here, and knowing, in fairness, knowing what's going on as much as we do at this point, I'm going to take an educated guess, because I would have assumed that there's the possibility that somebody would have been stealing money from him, right? Because, big long-term losses, stuff like that. But now looking at it this way, I'm really wondering if he is not in debt to somebody in a big, big way. There's financial losses that are occurring here because he owes somebody money in a huge way, or owes a huge debt to somebody. But I suspect this is money, or business deal's gone bad. But again, we'll see. We'll see. Now, the other thing that's important about this personal year horoscope, right, is if you look, this exact opposition between Venus and Neptune is in the rectified chart, the solar return, is in his 4th and 10th house. Now, the 4th and 10th house, these are important houses because they represent not only our public life and public image, but also the foundations of our life, or the roots of our existence. So with Venus and Neptune in opposition like this does not bode well in terms of the solid ground underneath his feet. Because here, Neptune, this Neptune here, right, it is in its rulership in the 4th house of home, foundations, and endings. So whatever this Venus-Neptune opposition promises and delivers, it is the final blow. There's, again, long-term permanent losses. So that's not good. We're not thrilled with this. Not thrilled with this at all. So he's definitely taking some serious heat for this. And in the solar return or personal predictor chart, Venus rules the, you ready for this? The 11th house of groups, friends, and associations. This is somebody he knows. This is not a family member. I don't even know that this is necessarily a business partner per se, right? But it could be. But this is definitely somebody that he knows that's involved in this, and somebody has set him up. Somebody has set him up. He has been betrayed because also too, Neptune rules victims. So this man has been set up by somebody he knows, who is an acquaintance, or it's not a romantic partner, it's not a marriage partner. This is an acquaintance or somebody who wanted to be a business partner or something of that nature. He's in a bad way with somebody, because clearly whatever is happening, it doesn't affect them. The mud splashes everywhere, but they've managed to avoid it. Okay. Now, some other things that are happening. So I was like, okay, well, what about Saturn? What is Saturn doing at this time, right? Well, and this is for like, because remember, the Cassie lawsuit was within days of his birthday. So I'm like, well, maybe Saturn should be showing up strong somewhere, right? And I'm not really seeing a lot of Saturn activity. So Saturn, what I am seeing though, is Saturn is squaring, or his natal Saturn, I'm sorry, this is his natal Saturn, okay, is squaring the solar return moon in this chart. Now, the moon is on the 9th house, okay, which indicates legal problems. So anytime you've got heavy 9th house activity, it usually indicates that there's legal things that you're going to be dealing with, or higher education, you know, or long distance travel. Like, pick one of the three, but that's typically what comes up. So he's not going back to college. He wasn't doing a whole big foreign world tour. So the only thing left is legal problems. And with it squaring his natal Saturn in that 7th house, again, business partnerships gone wrong, partners being betrayed. Somebody had it in for him in a big way. And that is why the feds got involved. Okay. Now, I think this started before this birthday year, but the kickoff, the season kickoff for the game was definitely after this solar return started. So that was interesting, right? And so now we get to the eclipse, right? So this dad blast 25 eclipse kind of got us all jarred and rocking and rolling here. What was it doing? Was it doing anything to his natal? Well, with the eclipse and his natal chart, I'm not seeing it. I might be missing it, but I'm not seeing a lot of tight connections, except dun 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 dun. He carries Pluto at 26 Virgo. This eclipse in Pisces opposed that Pluto, activated and opposed it. And where is this natal Pluto in his chart? In the 11th house, friends and associates, groups and parties. And that's exactly where he's getting nailed. It's that social life, those people at those parties, the groups, the acquaintances. There's something about that, obviously, because that's where the feds are going. That's key to all of this. Somebody betrayed him in a big way, and it all centers around acquaintances, people that he knows, people he comes in contact with in these parties, okay? So the eclipse absolutely connected to the Pluto in his chart. Now, Pluto in his chart, again, if you look at his natal chart, goes back here, hello, that 2nd house. So again, money, and resources. Something's going on that involves big money, big money. And I say big money because A, it's Pluto, but also too, Neptune has a lot to do with huge amounts of wealth. And also money you don't see, because Neptune likes to hide things. So does Scorpio. So this is not good. This is not good. So that's where we see the eclipse activity in his chart, my friends. And in the solar return chart, right? In the solar return chart, it's here. Okay, this 25-degree Pisces eclipse occurred because it happened within this birthday to birthday year, conjuncting Neptune, okay, which we just talked about, right? Neptune's a huge player in his solar return this year, and opposing Venus. So again, the eclipse is mirrored. So not only is the eclipse hitting his natal Pluto in the 11th house in his solar return, it conjuncts Neptune, opposing Venus, which is his chart ruler. And I know this all sounds like Greek, but we're piecing these together because there's a lot of information we just don't have. Okay, but I can tell you this, and I promise you this, that whatever this is, and whoever started this, I mean, talk about this means war. He's done. Diddy is done. Diddy is done, and he will be lucky if he is alive next year. So suicide watch is a very, very real thing for him, because somebody's waiting for him, and if they're willing to do all of this and make all of this mess and get all of these people dragged down with him to get back at him, that means they also, one, weren't the least bit worried about showing up on tapes at his house. They're probably never there during those parties, even though they knew about them. But also, two, if they're willing to do all that, that also means they probably are part of the criminal underground. And Diddy has lots of ties to the criminal underground. Let's not be stupid here. And that means they have people inside prison that are waiting for him. And I guarantee you it won't be a quick death. They will make him hurt in really bad ways for a long time and make him beg for death before he dies, if this is what is going on and this is how pissed off somebody is at him. So that's what we've got for that, and that's why I think that 29 Libra rising is the rectified time is the right one. This is the 25 Pisces eclipse chart, and this is his rectified natal, and we're going to get into that in a second. So I just want to say a couple of things. One, given his family's connections to the criminal underground in New York, and also questions about who was funding his life those early years, I'm sure he's been connected to and in contact with many of those people throughout his life. Okay. And here's the thing I just want to say as an observation. I'm not an expert, don't hold it against me, right? But this is what I've seen from my generation, and he and I are not that far apart in age. It is still with white executives, especially because it's typically all male executives at this point, right? That are in the upper echelons of these corporations and stuff. With white male executives, what typically happens is you can have literally an entire team of managers and executives, junior executives underneath you, but the black guy is always the one they lean on to get them the things that are illegal, right? Because I've seen this at jobs. I used to work at a gym. It's all white guys, all management, except for like one or two people are like all white guys, frat brothers and stuff, and gym rats, mostly frat brothers, because you have to have college education to be in management. Or upper management or an executive. So, but the one manager I had was this incredibly gifted, charming young man who was fantastic at his job, great with people, and he was just excellent. So, of course, he moved up the ranks very quickly, but he also happened to be black, the only black guy in the department for 3 or 4, franchise centers in this particular corporation. And not long after he had moved up to an upper management level, I learned that they were also, and certainly he was buying into this, but they were leaning on him to get them pot, because this was before you had medical marijuana and it was legal and accessible in different places. So the thing about it is, what typically happens is there's the assumption that because you're the black guy, like you'll know like where to get this stuff, right? And with Diddy's history and his family connections and all, bad boy records and gangster rap and all sort of stuff, it's not unthinkable that anybody would assume that if anybody knew how to get anything that was illegal, like he would know how to get it, right? And the thing about it is, you can say what you want about making choices. We make the best choices we can given whatever circumstances or opportunities we have. And unfortunately, when you're faced with bad, worse, or no choices, typically go with the bad, because no choice and worse choice is not really an option. And Frank Lucas, the drug kingpin out of Harlem back in the 60s and 70s, is a classic example. Had Frank Lucas been born at any other time under any other circumstances, Frank Lucas could be one of these billionaire boys clubs, like racing to space as a hobby, at our taxpayer expense, because Frank Lucas was a genius. And an incredible businessman, super savvy, or he could have been a great politician. He could have been a whole number of things that were on the other side of the law. But because of the constraints of choices and opportunities that were available to him, which were extremely limited, literally worst choice, bad choice, no choice, he did the best he could with the cards that were laid out in front of him. So Sean Coombs, in a situation where executives are leaning on him to get things that are illegal, that we wouldn't dare ask Jimmy to go get it, because where would Jimmy go? Probably, at some point said, sure, I'll do that, but you got to do something for me, because remember, he's that Mars and Capricorn man, hustler. He's a hustler through and through, and he doesn't do anything based on sympathy, sentiment, or affection. It's literally all about calculations for him. So he's made a lot of calculated choices that I'm sure were at the behest of powerful executives who wanted things that they didn't dare ask somebody else to provide an avenue for. So we be pimping, baby, we be pimping. And I think that's a lot of what's also going on here with him and where they're trying to go with all of this, or where they're going to end up trying to go. But it's not good. It's not good. Anyway, so I just want to put that out there. Now the younger generations are different. Times are changing. We're getting where we need to be, but there are some things that are holdovers. So before you judge him for making crappy choices, understand that his choices may have been worse, bad, or none. Okay, and people make the best choices they can given the opportunities and circumstances that they find themselves in. Okay, there are some things nobody ever says, I'm going to grow up and do this. They don't do that. But when you find yourself in that position, you do what you got to do. Now, as far as the parties go, right, this whole Sodom and Gomorrah Roman circus orgy that he was orchestrating in his house, that's a personal choice. Okay, he did that for his own entertainment and his own benefit, for his own prurient, interests. That has nothing to do with being given choices between worse, bad, and none, okay? Because he had lots of choices for entertaining himself, and he consistently, over and over again, chose that and got louder and more, whatever with it. Which also brings us to, I just want to get into this real quick because I thought this is interesting, right? So with the younger generation, it's different for them. For you guys, for a lot of you guys, you're in a world where for many of us, we don't care if you're gay, we don't care if you're bisexual, we don't care as long as it doesn't involve unconscious or dead people, animals, or children. As long as the person is an adult and capable of consenting consciously, we're good with it. Like, you do you, boo. You guys are living in a great time, and it will get better. It will get better because we love you no matter who you're dating. That's not our problem. That's not what we love about you. We love you. But speaking as somebody who's from the generation that Sean Coombs is from, I can tell you that there's a huge, oh my God, there's a huge stigma about being gay, especially if you're a man and especially if you're a black man. So one of the things to understand is that in this country, because colonizers, it's not about white people versus black people. It's about colonizers, right? Colonizers are the people who go in, take over an area, a territory, make it their own, and then force everyone else to adopt their ways of living and to try to be them at the expense of themselves, right? Hence, colonizers who came to the United States pretty much drove the Native Americans almost into extinction. Colonizers who moved to Australia, right, when we sent all those prison convicts to Australia as punishment, they pretty much almost made the Aboriginal people extinct, right? England, the great motherland that has colonized most of the Western world, even in India, right? So it's colonizer is not about being white. White is a DNA thing. It's a racial thing. You can't help that. And it's not built into the genes. Colonizing is a mentality, right? And had it been any other race that had colonized the world, we'd only be having a slightly different conversation right now. Okay, so with that said, here in the United States, think colonizers. So the colonizers who came in, set up camp in the United States and took over, later brought in other minorities, right? But they're the ruling class, so because they're the colonizers, so they made the rules. The problem is the minorities that they brought in, especially from Africa, as opposed to China, which also they did later. This was part of a plantation slave like worldview, and also the slaves that they brought in, these were warriors, and anybody who was able to physically survive the trip from Africa to here in the inhumane conditions that they were living in on the trip, like you had to be nearly superhuman, right? Because many people died from illness and all sorts of things on the way and just couldn't withstand the trip. So the ones who did survive were remarkably strong, powerful, and physically robust. You had to be to survive that. And then they come here, and now these colonizers looking at these almost superhuman physiques of human beings. And of course, because the world at that time has been run by men, and men see the entire world based on their penis, they're all looking at these guys going, oh, wait a minute, right? So of course, now we get into the pissing contest, right? The dick measuring contest. So since that time, there's been this huge hyperfixation, a hypersexualization, an obsession with black men, and their sexuality or their genitalia, as it were, okay? With that said, insecure people are not rational people. So a lot of what's happened over time has been an unconscious drive to, air quotes, put them in their place, which is literally just weaker men feeling insecure about their sexuality and their sexual power, against this physically powerful being who just survived a ridiculous life-threatening journey for months and humble them and make them smaller because they're scared of them. If you've ever, like Sean Coombs is a great example. Sean Coombs beats these women that he beats to remind them who's in charge. He does that to make himself feel powerful. Even though he's physically stronger than they are, psychologically, he doesn't see it that way. And psychologically, he feels the need to make absolutely crystal clear who's in charge and how much power he has over her. We've got an entire nation that's built on this slave plantation mentality with insecure men in positions of power still to this day, who won't even address their own personal insecurities and instead project it out onto other people. And part of it is about reducing the other person who's triggering all these insecurities and uncomfortable feelings reducing them to something smaller, like using force and power to reduce them to something smaller so that they don't feel as weak or small by comparison. And because men see everything through their Johnson, you know what I mean? That's, I hate to say it, but that's literally what this is all about. Okay, so with that said, now follow me here. With that said, so now you imagine that you're a black man in a world where none of this makes any sense. Why are these people so fixated on me and keeping me down and hurting me and disrespecting me and demeaning me and trying to make me, you know, literally grind my face into the mud with their boot? Why do they insist on trying to humiliate me every chance they get? And it's random. I never know who's going to do this. Like, what is this about? Little lady, I was just walking down the street to go get a coffee. So there's that, right? And also, you have these people who are hyper fixated on sexually objectifying you, which is like, oh my God, you know, I'm a whole person here, right? And all those sort of things. So you just feel schizophrenic after a while. So the thing about it is, in this type of environment, which is very hostile and very threatening and very dehumanizing, okay, and because you literally become a caricature of yourself that you don't even recognize because it has nothing to do with who you are as a person. You have to put on the strong face. You have to put on the game face. You have to be strong. So the thing is, in a male-dominated world, which is where we've been for a long time, men have been given the role, responsibility, and story that they have to protect women from those other men, okay? So all men act like gorillas, and they have to puff up and be super dominant and super territorial to protect the women and the children from the external threat, which is anyone that's not them, okay? So black men, facing all of this that they do and all this irrational, insecure, like stuff people, specifically men, projected them, you know, to beat them down into a manageable psychological size. So the oppressor, or the I just lost my word. Colonizer. So the colonizer does not feel so weak and insignificant next to this powerful thing in their mind, right? With all of that said, he's still a man in a man's world that is run by men in a patriarchal society. So he still has the responsibility to protect the women and the children around him, okay? Which means that he cannot afford to show weakness. He cannot afford to be soft. So he must puff up and be strong, okay? And part of puffing up and being strong means being domineering, being dominant, right? It absolutely becomes a show of force, just standing upright. So the thing about it is, with gay men, we know not all gay men are effeminate men, but effeminate men are always seen as gay men because, you know, sometimes they are. So the thing about it is, if you're effeminate, if you're soft, if you're feminine and you're a man, you're aligning with women. You're presenting with womanish qualities. You're presenting as weak because it's the weak that need protection, not the strong. And if you're presenting as weak and you're a man, you're asking for the world to hurt you, okay? Which is why black men, as a rule, tend to come up as hyper dominant, right? Hyper masculine, okay? They have to. It's a response to everything that they're dealing with. So the problem is, in the culture and the society, it works over time, right? There's too much going into in this video, but ultimately, being gay, because if you're gay, means one of you has to be the bottom, because it's all about power for guys, right? Power. Men see the world through the lens of power. So if you're gay, one of you has to be the squirmy soft bottom that's receiving, which means that you're the weak partner, which means you're not really strong, and that's not okay, because that means that you are a weak link. So the disapproval of gay men is incredibly strong in some quarters in terms of being a real man. So it's very frowned upon. The homophobia is real, right? And the other thing is that, given the separation of families and children, you know, being ripped from the arms of their mothers and stuff during the plantation years here in the country, you know, family and children is extremely important because there's still fresh generational memories of having your families torn apart, being forced to have families that you didn't want, with people you didn't want to have families with, or people you didn't even know, you know, being treated like chattel, and then having these children ripped from you, having your partners or your mothers, your sisters ripped away from you, right? So family units become extremely valuable in these communities because the trauma, this generational trauma, is still fresh. It wasn't that long ago this was going on. So the idea with both the colonizers and everyone else in every part of the country, every part of the world, The challenge is that with gay people, they represent the end of family, because if you're gay, you're not producing children, in theory, right? Because gay sex does not produce children. So there's a real fear and concern that a family line or the tribal line will end with that, and they can't afford that, right? Because we need our children to keep us safe when we're older as well. So in the Black community, and this is all my observation, I'm not an expert, so certainly feel free to put comments in below. Do not be inflammatory or rude or disrespectful or insulting. I will delete the comment and block you. Civil discourse is what we're looking at. Civil intelligent discourse. Use your brain cells. Use your big words. So with that said, in the Black community, right, being gay, being a gay man, you know, being weak, being soft, being effeminate, being a bottom, being without power, these are not okay things. And also, you know, representing the end of family lines, not okay. So there's a huge homophobic mask that everybody has to put on. You're not allowed to be gay in ways that run deeper and wider than they do in the colonizers' cultures. Okay, and certainly is very prevalent in all poor countries. If you go into first world countries, you don't see that intolerance as much as you will see it in poor countries for all the reasons that I just said. So it's not unthinkable that we've got a whole lot of gay men in Black communities that are way deep in the closet to everyone except the out in the open gay men. And the what is it, the drag queens and the cross-dress, well, not the cross-dress, but the drag queens and the effeminate gay men and the queens and all the very out there, like, we knew you were gay coming around the corner. We could see it. They can tell you exactly who's on the down low and who's pitching for both teams or pitching for one and in denial about it. So it's not that these things don't exist as much as it's really frowned upon. So it's not unthinkable that Sean Diddy Combs would have created this environment where he could basically, air quotes, be himself. Because remember too, that Venus-Jupiter conjunction ruling the chart in the 12th house, he is attracted to relationships that are in the shadows, relationships that are typically frowned upon by society, relationships that are not necessarily understood or approved of by other people. All right, he would have made a great gigolo, I'm telling you. So, you know, if being a gay man is like the worst thing that could possibly happen, because it's super hyper macho culture, right? And it's not just the Blacks, it's also the, you know, the Spanish and the Asians, anywhere you've got hyper macho as part of the manly man kind of identity, right? Cowboys are a classic example too, American cowboys, right? Being gay is like the worst thing you could possibly do. It's an invitation to get abused, you know, and hurt, because people don't know what to do with that and they frown upon it. So I can see where he would have created this environment where it made it safe for him to be himself, basically. Unfortunately, this is kind of where we've come to in our world, that this is what the lengths people have to go, you know, to be safe, loving who they love and enjoying who they enjoy. As long as they are adults and capable of conscious consent, knowing what they're getting into, you shouldn't care. You should be paying attention to your own business. And if your sex life is so boring that you're worried about what your neighbor does in their bedroom, you've got much bigger problems than what your neighbor's doing. I'm just saying. Whee! Okay, so that's my long culture thing, right? Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Okay. And also, too, I just wanted to mention one of the other things that you should remember, a lot of the world is viewed by men through the lens of power. So also gay sex is about power dynamics too, right? Which is kind of interesting. And just like the beatings of the women that he is with or has been with, that's about power, dominance, and control also. So he's expressing his chart. He's just expressing it in ways I would not want to believe that would be an option for him. But the maniacal side of him that has his hair trigger like crazy, like he's going to kill this woman kind of thing, just out of nowhere for sheer spite and entertainment that he does this. It's coming from that Mars, Saturn, Sun, Mercury. Okay. And also, here's a sidebar. I could be completely wrong about this. This is only my experience and observation. I just want to share this because I thought this was interesting. So we were talking, and I'm wondering also, too, how much of his prejudice and specific targets that he's beaten, like badly, were influenced by his mother's prejudices. Because he and his mother are very, very close. So, you know, and it's not uncommon for mothers to feed their toxic dysfunction into their sons about other women. Right? I've seen it. I've dated these guys. I've seen them date my girlfriends. So you want to know like how messed up a man's attitude about women is? Check his parents, because the mother will filter and feed and nurture his views and understanding about how women work and what their value is in his life, separate from her, of course. And the father will show and teach the boy by example and word and reinforcement, again, how much respect or value women deserve and which ones should be getting it, if any, right? So if the father died when he was young, so it's all the mother. And also, too, there's a little bit of colorism that happens, too. And, you know, Sean Diddy is very dark. His women that he preferred to be, with the exception of J-Lo, think about that for a second, were all very light-skinned, bright-skinned, like almost passing white black women. Beautiful women, but very, very light-skinned, bright-skinned, passing almost. Well, Cassie passed. But J-Lo, who's also very fair-skinned, never got beaten. And you can't tell me it's because J-Lo is such a badass. She's not, right? But she's not black, so she doesn't count, right? There's this weird cultural thing or racial thing. Like, it's how men treat women of their own race is very, very different from how they treat women of other specific races. And even then, it's not universal. So how a black man treats black women is going to be, for a lot of them, will be very different from how they treat Hispanic women, which will also be very different from how they treat Asian women, from how they treat white women, depending on what their pre-existing views of that culture and those women are. Not always the same, but definitely something to think about. So I'm wondering how much his mother had to do influence that. And also, too, in my experience and observation, there are some gay men who, and he's probably bisexual, but I'm going to say he's just gay, all right? And these women are all beards, you know, just proving that he could have sex with them because I'm not actually gay. Anyway, with some gay men, they're jealous of women. And they're jealous of women because they want to be the woman. And I don't mean they want to be the woman like they want to have a sex change. I mean they want to be the woman as in they want the male attention that's going to her, not him. I want them to look at me, not you, right? I want him to fall in love with me, not you. You know, I want to have the easy life where everybody's flattering me and telling me beautiful I am and doing things for me. Like, I want them to do that for me, not for you. So there's a lot of almost rivalry, jealousy I see sometimes. And unfortunately, when I've seen it, it's been very toxic. Those guys genuinely hate and resent women because they want to be the woman, not have a sex change. They want to be the man in the man body that they're in, but they want the experiences that they see women as having that they're not getting. They want the love, attention, and admiration from other men that's being given to the women that they're not getting. Right? So it's a weird thing. And I think personally, just off the cuff, I'm thinking that may be the issue with him and that may be where all this rage against these women are. So it's power, control, and domination. I'm going to show you his boss and you're going to understand it with no uncertain terms, like question it. Because this is sport and entertainment for me, right? And also, too, the fact that I resent you and I'm jealous of you because you're getting all the things I wish I had for me makes this even more delightful that I do it to you. And remember, these are light-skinned, bright-skinned, passing black women, and he is a very dark black man. So if he were wanting to be the woman, right, I'm sure he would want to be them. Because remember, that generation also, there's a lot of colorism and a whole lot of things that are very different for us, for his generation and mine, than it is for you guys that are younger. It's not healthy, but that's kind of where it's at. All right, blah, 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 blah. Okay, got that off my chest. Feel free to comment below. Okay, now looking at the eclipse chart. So this is the chart here. This is the chart for the date of the eclipse. And this is Sean Coombs' rectified chart. So I wanted to see, was there anything going on that day specific to his chart that was of any particular use or interest? And boy, howdy, did I find some stuff that you're going to be interested in. So remember, now we just talked about his natal Neptune is on that second house, and Neptune is all over the solar return chart for this year, right? It's getting hammered and it's not good. One of the other things that I noticed is that this 25-degree eclipse, again, look at that, remember we just talked about that, it opposes his Pluto in his 11th house of groups and associations, his social life. Now, here's what's interesting. The asteroid Nemesis, yes, my friends, Nemesis, like I am your mortal enemy, I am your Nemesis, is at 22 Virgo, which means it puts it right here. I'll put N there for Nemesis, right? The eclipse was at 25 Pisces. So not only was this eclipse activating that Pluto, it was also, look at that, activating the asteroid Nemesis in That 11th house of groups and associations. I'm telling you, somebody set this man up and they've got it in for him bad. So I thought that was interesting. If you want to play with asteroids, you can look up Nemesis. Now, Damocles shows up at, I think, 15 or 28 Aquarius. It's pretty late in Aquarius. And I didn't really use it here. Damocles may show up as a significant player later on this year or into the next year in solar return, because this whole investigation is just starting. So we'll see how that goes. But for right now, Nemesis is giving us a clue why this is all happening. Somebody is literally after this guy. Now, here's the other thing. This is the chef's kiss, pièce de résistance of the chart. Transiting Pluto at this time was at 29 Capricorn retrograde. Pluto had just gone back into Capricorn. Remember, we talked about Pluto going backward into Capricorn for the final time as the cleanup crew. And remember, where is Sean Coombs' Mars? Right there at 29 Capricorn. So under this eclipse, Pluto backed up dead on that Mars in Capricorn on that 4th house cusp. End of life, root of the matter, family, home, the solid ground that we walk on. At the same time, the eclipse was activating the asteroid Nemesis, which is over here, and his natal Pluto. And if you want to really push it, Jupiter at that time, transiting Jupiter, set up a T-square to the eclipse Pluto Nemesis combination. Well, that's not good. And my friends, look at this. That Jupiter sits in the 8th house of shared resources and debts, right? I'm telling you, I think this is money. I think this is a business deal gone bad, or somebody who's betrayed for money or business. Not good. At the same time, while all this is happening, as if this wasn't enough, my friends, transiting Uranus is right there on the cusp of his 8th house of resources and investments. So Uranus brings things to light, and so do eclipses. So his finances are going to be laid on the table, and everyone connected to him in business and finance is about to find them with their behinds hanging out and exposed, because this Uranus on that 8th house is definitely going to make us painfully aware of what he's got going on and what he doesn't have going on. And I can guarantee you, whoever's pissed off at him this much, that's doing all of this, I'm pretty confident they don't have any traceable financial ties to him, because I think it's a business deal gone bad, or he owes somebody money, and that may or may not show up in his financial documents. But his finances are going to be front and center stage before this is all over. So that's what we saw for the eclipse. And honestly, I wanted to see more tight, exact aspects. I wanted to see something more pow, right? But I didn't see it. There's a lot going on, and certainly rings true and reflects what we're seeing, but I wanted to see more. So I said, you know what, and also too, federal agencies do not suddenly swoop in like, on Friday after having a discussion about it on Monday. Like, they take months and months to do deep investigation because they can't afford to make mistakes. And they also can't afford to let you get away. So whatever happened that brought them to this point now under this Pisces eclipse would have been started easily a year ago or longer. This would have been a long, lengthy investigation before they finally pulled the trigger and said, okay, go, right? Especially considering the resources, Jesus, the trucks and the guns and the SWAT teams. Like, this was not an impulsive decision. This was a long, deep investigation, because after that requires coordination and planning, and then the date set, and then it's go time. So I said, with that said, let's look backwards in time. Maybe there are some other eclipses before now that may tell us a little bit what was going on. There must be something, right? Well, my friends, in 2023, in April, there was an eclipse at 29 Aries, which would have been on his descendant. So my best guess is that whoever it is that he's pissed off this much, this trouble may have started, or it may have been brewing. The right in here, something around this month would have been the tipping point in that relationship that would have started this whole cascade of problems. Now, following that, in April, we had a second eclipse at 15 Scorpio. That 15 Scorpio is very close to his sun, right? And again, identity, who we are, what we're doing. So something was going on, something very personal and very important was going on in terms of his life directions. And if he screwed somebody over here, this may have been the conversation they were having here. Maybe. We don't know. All this will come out. We'll watch and see, but watch these dates, right? Now, the next date that comes out, I thought this was the important one. It's right here. It's October. So in October 2023, there were two eclipses. One was at 21 Libra, okay, which conjuncted his natal Venus Jupiter. This is the one I'm really curious to see what happened here. The next one was at 5 Taurus, which conjuncts his natal Saturn and squares his natal midheaven. The month of October would have been huge, like literally setting off a firecracker in the middle of an arsenal of firearm artillery shells and stuff. Like October would have been the tipping point and would have really set this thing off. Okay. Now, interestingly, it was November when Cassie's lawsuit was officially filed. So, typically we look for the big dates for these things to happen. And I didn't see anything happening in November, and I couldn't find any trigger points that set off around November 16th with Cassie's lawsuit. So again, going back to October, something in October is going on. Cassie's lawsuit may have been the tip of an iceberg only because she got the ball rolling with a whole bunch of other people. But there's multiple things happening at the same time. I'm still saying October's the telltale month. October, May, and April, but definitely October. So this was a Cassie's lawsuit, while extremely important, and certainly the head of the parade was a tipping point, but I don't think that's really what pulled the trigger on all the things that have started since then. So I think whatever started and initiated Cassie's lawsuit, however this came into existence, and again, it's not something that happens overnight, right, would have been coming from way back here, right? But of course, we don't have that information either. Now, what I also thought was interesting, I want to share this with you. In December of 2023, Jupiter stationed direct at 5 Taurus on his Saturn, okay? Now, what's important about December is that with all the lawsuits that literally came out of the woodwork after Cassie filed hers in November, this one in December was the first allegation or accusation of underage sex trafficking and gang rape. And let me tell you, people will look the other way for a whole lot of stuff because, adults can do what adults do, but you start talking about raping underage minors, or worse, sex trafficking them and raping them, or worse, sex trafficking and gang raping them. Oh, honey, all bets are off. That's it. It's go time. We're done now, right? No more looking the other way. Your ass is mine now. So I thought it was interesting that Jupiter stationed direct at the same time this came out, right? And that this literally would have been the killing blow as far as any lenience or tolerance for him. So he's done, cooked, baby, cooked. And that, my friends, is how I came to conclude that I believe he is 29 Libra rising, last chance lifetime. And also all my homework, how I came to this conclusion using the events in his life. And I have not done, because this literally took me all day, I have not done the solar returns moving forward, because right now there's literally everybody, their brother is a Diddy story now. So it's a little overwhelming. So I'm waiting for the dust to settle and some of the facts in the case to actually come forward so we can actually see what's really going on and why, and what the feds are specifically going after him for, and what got them this worked up in the first place. Because there's more here. Like we don't even have the half of it. So let's watch and see how this plays out. And we'll see. Like he might not even make it to his birthday next year in 2025. It's looking grim. It's looking really grim. But again, this is not about him so much as the people around him. And clearly, if the rectified time of birth is accurate and this is true, somebody really has it in for him. And that's also why he is terrified of going to prison, because he knows whatever's waiting for him inside that prison is going to be a lot more painful, than just going to court and serving some jail time. Somebody's out to hurt him in a big, bad way, and they don't care who else gets hurt in the process. Ooh, Lordy. So this will get interesting. So there you go. That's how I rectify a quick and dirty rectification of the chart. Again, I could be wrong. If you have a different opinion, Please feel free. Tell me what you think his ascendant is, and show your homework, because I really want to know how you got to your conclusions as well. And let's watch and see how the details fill in the missing information we don't have access to right now. All right, questions, comments, concerns, pats on the back, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to hang around. And, send me a little message and I'll answer you. All right, now I have to go back to the real world because the world is terrifying out there these days, and I'm going to go make something to drink and some dinner. And you guys be well. And remember, astrology will not, cannot, and does not show a person's character. It will show what they're working with. Character is who you choose to become at any given moment based on the choices and circumstances that you're presented with. And everyone, all the time, always is trying to make the best choices they know how with the choices they're presented with and the circumstances around them. So if you've only got a choice between worse, bad, and no choice, typically you're going to go for the bad choice because it's really the only better option you have in that moment. But when you have better choices and you know better, do better. All right? Be safe out there. Lots of love. Meditate, meditate, meditate. Mass consciousness, man. One big wave raises all boats. So let's focus on the positive and getting this ship turned even more around this corner and getting away from all this old, crappy ways of doing things. Because it shouldn't be a crime to be gay. It just shouldn't. And you shouldn't feel like a criminal just because you're gay. All right, folks. Talk to you later.